From this day forward, it's going to be only America first.
Your voice, America. Your voice, America.
When you open your heart to patriotism, there is no room for prejudice.
The silent majority is silent no more.
These are people who work hard but no longer have a voice. I am your voice.
And thanks so much for sticking with us here at Steel Truth. I'm joined today with Derek Maltz, who is a former DEA special agent in charge of the Special Operations Division over there. We're going to be talking about the cycle of the drug trade, addiction, crime, and how terrorism plays a major role. We'll also talk about Operation Cassandra and why that's so significant today. Derek, it's great to be with you. How are you?
I'm doing fine, and thank you very much for bringing me on the show. I really appreciate it.
Oh, of course, of course. From a Jersey girl to a guy from clearly not the Deep South, anyhow. You come from a family of law enforcement, Derek. Your father and you both worked in the DEA for 30 and 28 years, respectively, and were chiefs of the New York Drug Enforcement Task Force in New York City, which included the DEA, the New York Police Department, and the New York State Police. And sadly, your brother Michael died during Operation Enduring Freedom in 2003 as a member of the U.S. Air Force Pararescue Unit. I believe he was over Afghanistan, correct?
Yeah, he was over in Afghanistan, and his helicopter crashed, and he and 5 others died in the crash. So, yeah, my father, was in law enforcement for 30 years. I got in law enforcement out of college, and I had a great career. I loved it, and I really have it in my blood, my DNA, to actually continue doing what I'm doing.
And we're so grateful for that because, as you know, and as our audience is becoming more and more aware of, we have a huge problem with drug addiction in this country. Drugs are killing families nationwide. We know that our first responders, who are so valuable, are tied up in dealing with a lot of these drug overdoses. And what I'm understanding is that the FDA actually has warnings on our blood supply because there's poisons being found in our nation's blood supply due to the fact that the drugs people are ingesting and then, of course, donating blood, sadly enough, is tainted. So let's take this discussion, Derek, from the neighborhood money supply and how that promulgates itself into the drug trade and ultimately into the terrorism network.
Well, first of all, let me just make it really clear. China is dumping poison all over our country. The Mexican cartels are getting extremely rich, as you saw Sinaloa cartel kingpin Chapo Guzman, one of Forbes magazine's richest guys in the world, right? And then what's really alarming is the fact that we have businesses all over America that are involved with used cars, with convenience stores, with bodegas, and they're sending millions of dollars back to Yemen and other areas in the Middle East. So when people think of the drug crisis, what's being left out is the national security implications for our country's safety. And so citizens of America, they think, it's just about should marijuana be legal or illegal? They're missing the point. There's a global transnational crime element to this drug crisis, and we really need to understand it. And that's kind of what I've been doing is I've been looking at this closely, talking to my friends in law enforcement and other areas of government, and it's really disturbing, especially now. And you see what's happening in America with all these overdoses. They're selling synthetic drugs that come from labs in China. And kids are smoking this, and homeless are smoking it, and they're bleeding from their eyes and the ears, because they're putting rat poison in it. And one of the things the public needs to realize, Ann, is back in the day, right, the Afghan tribal kingpins used to say how selling heroin to the West is a global jihad against the West, because they're not only selling poison that's hurting our communities, but they're making millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars to support their terrorist agendas. And so that's really, really what my focus is, Ann, every day, because, I'll give you an example. In this country, everybody will tell you that terrorists are turning to criminal networks for funding, but our system is still broken because our terrorist investigators and our crime investigations, there's a wall up because of classification, all kinds of issues, that we saw in 9/11. So we have some serious work to do, and that's why I appreciate coming on to this show to be able to educate the public.
So what you're really advocating for is the ability for all the agencies to work together. And this is some of the things we've been talking about on this show because, as you know, all the initial agencies from the CIA, the FBI, the DEA, the ODNI, all these agencies are supposed to work in silos, keep their information separate from one another, and it takes certain acts to be enacted for them to actually share their information freely, and the previous administration was doing that and allowing access of private contractors into the NSA supercomputer just to spy on Americans. However, the technology is there. We have the ability to know what is going on prospectively and prevent a lot of this stuff. And we're seeing this over and over again. Like you said, China poisoning our own citizens, Afghanistan and the likes of Hezbollah through, poisoning our own American citizens through drug addiction. And that's, like you said, it's a jihad. It's a war on the American citizens. Not only are they capitalizing on killing Americans regularly by overdosing on these horrific drugs that are synthetically tainted, but they're also warring a jihad financially because they are capitalizing through the drug trade to finance terror. So let's just talk about that because, it starts in our neighborhood, right? These little bodegas and these gas stations. And let's talk about who typically runs these entities and where the money actually goes. Okay, so there's a couple of issues right away. So when we talk about the Mexican cartels, they actually are dominating all the drug issues in America for the most part with the cocaine, the heroin, the methamphetamine, and the bulk marijuana. So the Mexicans have created a huge business empire where they're making, industrial, amounts of methamphetamine and even like heroin mixed with fentanyl now. They're buying the chemicals right from the Middle East, Asia, China, all these different countries over in Southwest Asia. And what they're doing is they have big labs, they bring chemists in, they make the drugs, they give them to the cartels, they push the drugs into the streets of America. So they kind of have like the monopoly on the drug trafficking trade. Now, there's other things going on like you're talking about. So you have bodegas now in this country, convenience stores, where it's kind of like a lot of small crime. So for example, 2007, Peter King wrote an article, it's called Tobacco and Terror. And he talked about how illegal tobacco trafficking in New York City was generating hundreds of millions of dollars going back to Hamas, Al-Qaeda, and Hezbollah. So what they were doing is importing cigarettes from North Carolina, South Carolina, selling them without paying the tax, and then sending the money back to support the radical agendas. Now, it's not just cigarette trafficking. It's now drug paraphernalia. So they buy their little glassine bags from China, from Asia. They bring it in. They sell it out the back door to the drug traffickers. Then they get involved with EBT fraud. So the welfare recipients are getting government cards. They're going into the bodega with a $100 card. The bodega owner from the Middle East is giving the person $50 cash and then taking the $100 card and going to one of these superstores and buying toilet paper and candy and soda to sell. So he just made 100% profit on that $100 card. But all that money is getting commingled to include these synthetic drugs and the counterfeit goods. And I don't know if you realize this, but counterfeiting is so huge now that between counterfeit, drug trafficking, human smuggling, drug paraphernalia, cigarette trafficking, there's billions of dollars being generated every single day. And the sad part is that it's happening in our country and we're allowing it to happen because we have a disconnect on the monies that are flowing out of America to go support these radical jihadist, terrorist agendas. So there's multiple problems. I mean, we could talk all day on the drug issues. Sure. But I don't want to confuse them because like the Mexican cartels are not really involved in this synthetic K2 and spice that you're seeing all over the news. Our nation's capital, we had hundreds of people like the Night of the Living Dead falling down on the streets. And then Connecticut, New York, Chicago, they died. People are dying. And so there's two kind of issues that I'm talking about. And the primary problem we have right now, as you know, is this massive opioid crisis. And that crisis is also being stimulated by the synthetic fentanyl that is being made in labs in China. And the Mexicans are smart. They know that for them to make money, if they can import like 1 kilogram of this this fentanyl into Mexico, right? It's only going to cost them $3,000 or $5,000. There's no overhead. They don't have to grow the poppies. They don't have to have the sun and the weather. Right. They're not putting themselves at risk. If they just buy the finished product and mix it with some powder and send it to America, they have customers for life. But unfortunately, the customers are dying because 2 milligrams will kill an adult. That's 4 grains of salt, by the way. So you want to hear this? 1 pound of fentanyl, pure fentanyl, could technically kill
like over 200,000 people, because if you do the math, 1 pound is over 450,000 milligrams, right?
Wow.
So people have to realize we're talking about a dangerous chemical weapon. And by the way, China is a communist country. They would love to destroy our communities with this poison, right? So we shouldn't be downplaying their role. We have to be more aggressive.
Well, let's take this, because that is completely frightening. Frankly, Derek, that is absolutely terrifying when you think about that. I had no idea the scale in which a small amount could kill such a large amount of people. That's absolutely terrifying. Let's take this over to the Middle East. Let's talk about Hezbollah's role in the global drug trafficking, warfare that they're ensuing on us. And let's talk about Project Cassandra, because I think some people have heard of it, but I'm not sure how relevant it is to the folks listening today.
Okay, so it's very interesting, and I learned a lot over the years. Believe me, I'm no terrorism expert. I'm no Hezbollah expert. I'm just a criminal investigator that learned. So what happened was we started seeing in the mid-2000s, like 2006, 2007, we started seeing a lot of Lebanese males getting involved with money laundering and cocaine down in Colombia. So we have really good partnerships with the Colombian National Police, and it was a major investigation that went down back in 2007, 2008, where we rounded up a bunch of really, really sophisticated global money launderers and drug traffickers. But what we uncovered was there were like thousands of phone calls intercepted by the Colombian National Police that were in, Arabic, where we had people listen to the calls, and we saw the magnitude of what this problem was. So what we learned, Ann, is we saw like ton quantities of cocaine leaving South America, specifically Venezuela, Colombia, and different countries. But the Colombians were basically shipping the cocaine into Africa. And you have all these militants and these generals that are securing the drugs in Africa and then pushing it into the European market, because you can get a lot more money in the European market, right? So once the monies were collected, right, the monies would be brought back into West Africa, and literally Middle Eastern couriers would carry suitcases of millions of dollars in cash right into Beirut, Lebanon. Once the money gets into Lebanon, it goes into money exchange houses, into the banks, and then here's the scary part. Then they routed hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars back to U.S. businesses, these used car businesses in our country, and these businesses were then buying lots of cars at auto auctions and then shipping them on Hezbollah shipping company lines back to West Africa to sell the cars. Now, this is what we call a trade-based money laundering scheme.
Right.
And it looks like a legitimate business because they're involved with cars, but the motive is to generate cash. Now, one thing that the viewers need to understand is in 2006, when Israel went to war with Hezbollah, there was a calculated plan by the hierarchy of this element of Hezbollah to generate cash. That's why they started this used car thing. Aman Juma, who was the main guy we indicted at the Eastern District of Virginia in this case, was indicted for moving $200 million a month through the scheme. And by the way, they also attributed 88,000 kilograms of cocaine proceeds from the Los Zetas cartel that he was involved in. That's one guy.
I want to kind of take this because we're getting close. We've got about 2 minutes left, but I want to tie this together with the Iran deal that President Obama initiated and got going, and that, thank goodness, President Trump has rewound the clock on that, because these two are interchangeable, and there was a reason why that Hezbollah was overlooked. What you're talking about got ignored. So can you tell the audience exactly what happened there? Because this was a linchpin to getting the Iran deal done.
So basically, what I didn't know anything about this Iran deal, as the head of the Special Operations Division, I was very concerned. We had 300 businesses in America identified in this scheme. We only were able to include 30 in the Southern District of New York scheme in the civil actions because we couldn't get cooperation, right? And then the head of the Threat Mitigation Working Group at the time, coincidentally, was Bruce Orr, okay? And so basically, had I known back in the day what I know now, then it would make more sense. Right. But basically, the things that were supposed to happen, like extraditions of major traffickers, never happened. Ali Fayed was a major terrorist sitting in Czech Republic that we indicted. He was arrested, and he was released to go back to Lebanon. Nobody in our government reached out to the Czech Republic to make sure we can get this guy back into America. Now, the thing that bothers me, Ann, is that, people were not paying attention, but yet it's all part of not only President Obama's transnational crime strategy, but President Trump signed in 2017 his transnational crime strategy. So can you imagine Put yourself in my place, right? So let me show you this picture here, only because this is what I remember. This is what James Stavridis gave me, the fireball of what was growing in South America, right?
Right.
And then the Homeland Security Director, Michael Chertoff, in 2008, said Hezbollah makes Al-Qaeda look like the minor leagues. That's a quote from our Homeland Security Director. And now I can't get the U.S. government to cooperate with each other in the agencies. So you can imagine. And so bottom line is now hindsight's 2020. What was the motive for not paying attention more to this global cocaine money laundering operation by Hezbollah? Was it the Iran deal? Well, I don't have all the secrets behind the closed doors, Ann. But what I'll tell you is many things that happen when I look back don't make any sense.
Right.
If public safety and national security is your priority, it doesn't make sense why this was ignored.
Yeah.
Because Hezbollah is growing. Oh, by the way, did you know that President Obama actually named Hezbollah as one of the most technically capable terrorist organizations in the world?
Well,
so
they're financed well enough. They should be technically capable of all the money. If you're talking $200 million a month just in car deals, come on.
Just in car deals. But what about the crates of cash that we gave them as a country? But my question for President Obama would be, like, if terrorism was your #1 priority in the Department of Justice and we had Hezbollah involved with this global cocaine operation, why didn't we shut them down? That's the question of the day. Now, they're still working very hard.
Can I ask you something? Who you had mentioned to me prior off camera that there were some folks that were to be briefed and they said no, or they refused the briefing. Who was that?
No, what happened was, and this is really disturbing, but like Eric Holder, he was very, very supportive of SOD operations in general. And I have to be fair about that. He was really supportive. He appreciated the work we were doing. Maybe it's a New York thing. He was from as well, and we kind of hit it off. But basically, what happened was he got briefed on this, and he was very concerned by the magnitude of the money, the drugs, and the connections to Hezbollah. So he directed his people to have further briefings to the national security team. Well, I was excited, so I'm saying, okay, this is great because now the whole government, all the intel community, FBI, everybody can kind of get together and do what's best for the country, not DEA, because this was never about DEA. And so what happened was we never heard back from anyone. Because the people that were involved with the national security staff, they obviously had other priorities, right?
Right. They had the Iran deal they had to get done. They didn't want anything to get in the way of that. They didn't want to upset the apple cart, would be my guess, because, like you said, Hezbollah was a big moneymaker for the bad guys over there, and they're trying to put something through on the books that really, like healthcare, you have to pass it to see what's in it. You have to sneak the pilots of cash over there to find out what's in the Iran deal. Well, we now know what was in it, and it was bad from the beginning. Wow, Derek, this has been incredibly informative. I'd love to have you back on at some point. I think there's definitely some more work that needs to be discussed here, and I know you're a wealth, or so we say, a vault of information, for lack of a better word. So, Derek, pleasure to have you on. Where can folks find you in social media if they want to learn more about what you're talking about?
So I would say go to Twitter, but all the shadow banning, they probably won't find any of my posts. But Derek Maltz Sr. Twitter is a good place to start. But are they going to see my tweets? I don't know. You would know better. Bill would know better, probably.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, we know all about the shadow banning. It is what it is. Hopefully that'll be addressed here shortly. It sounds like the president's kind of on that, and the DOJ may be doing some investigating there. Thanks so much for stopping by today over here at Steel Truth. We really appreciate it, and we look forward to seeing you again. Take care.
Thank you very much, Ann. I appreciate it.
And folks, we'll be right back with some more Steel Truth. Stick with us. Thanks a lot.
I am your voice.